Hi, this is Lori. I'm looking at the discussion board number 6, I guess it is, the one having to do with all the magazines and what we found on those magazines. Yeah, that took a little while to do. Kind of interesting, actually. I looked at 25 magazines, and except for a few that had both or a couple of different races on them, the majority of them were Caucasian white, 17 of them. 5 of them had primarily African Americans on them, and 4 had the Latino Hispanics on them. The one that had Midwest Living had Caucasian white with Latino Hispanic on it, and I think that was the only one that had both. But to be very honest, in having said that, it was hard for me to decide on some of them. Were they Caucasian white? You know, was it obviously they were Caucasian white? Did they maybe have a little touch of Latino, Hispanic in them? But no, I did not see any Asian on there. So that I thought was kind of interesting. Maybe there were some blends, but I wasn't able to discern that so much. The ratio of women to men, most of them were female. I had 18 female on the covers and 10 men. Again, there was a couple of them where they had both. Again, Midwest Living, the OK magazine, and In Touch had both males and females on them, so that's the 28 instead of just 25. The men were typically clothed casual to very casual, and then there were several of the magazines that were really sports oriented, so they were, in athletic wear type things. So I didn't really know how to categorize that, so I kind of threw that in on its own little category. The women, primarily the women were casual to very casual. There was only one very casual that I called very casual. Most were casual. There were 3 that were in what I would consider seductive type, or suggestive, not seductive, but suggestive type clothing. And only one professionally dressed in what I would consider professional wear, maybe had a suit on. And that was kind of interesting to me. The body types that was most prevalent, thin to average, primarily thin, quite honestly, at least from my perspective. So again, it's that's going to be to me a judgment call from the individual, myself, thinking that person looks thin. Well, that person looks average. But no obese, in my opinion, no overweight. Some were athletic built. Of course, when I looked at the sports magazines, those were, to me, all athletically built, strong muscles, the athletic build, which makes total sense. To me, the most inclusive magazine, and by that I mean it had females, males, Caucasian whites plus Latino Hispanics, and that was Midwest Living. It was a cover, it looked like of a band, of some sort of musical group of some kind, not one that I was familiar with, but that was why I chose that they were most inclusive. And then the least inclusive really was primarily the women's magazine seemed to be least inclusive. Pretty much all, the majority of them were Caucasian whites, thin build, maybe to average build, and seemed to be, aimed at the Caucasian white female perspective. The ages on most of the magazines, I am, to be honest, a horrible judge of age. So if I didn't know the person, I'm gonna guess them, and I'm most likely not gonna be right. But primarily, the majority I thought was maybe in their 20s. 8 of those magazines were roughly 20s. Then 30s and 40s came in there close because they were both, I thought, about 7 of each of those ages. Only 2 that I felt were in their 50s, and 1 was in their 60s, and that was Oprah's magazine because I just know that she's 62, I believe. So I thought that was interesting as well. That, of course, geared towards the young female, spin to average person. Now that I think about it, a lot of them were not the blonde stereotyped female, but definitely geared towards the Caucasian white female to be attracted to those magazines, the clothing, the stories, the stars, whatever the type of magazine it was. Several sporting magazines, and again, those were the African American, primarily male athletes. Some of the health magazines, there were a couple, I wasn't quite sure if they were Caucasian white or Latino, but again, in their 20s and 30s and thin built. The brides magazines that I noticed were geared towards 20-year-olds, again, Caucasian whites. And of course, the women in those were pretty thin to average, dressed casually, but in wedding attire. So I don't know that you can qualify that as casual. So kind of interesting, when you look at that, what are the draws? What is a person, what am I going to be drawn to as a female, a Caucasian female? There was a couple of beautiful women on the covers. I think Redbook was one, and Vogue. Beautiful, beautiful women on those covers. They were not Caucasian white. So it was, they were just beautiful, regal almost. So just very interesting, kind of really does catch your eye as to why those magazines are published that way. Of course, probably speaking to they assume, I suppose, maybe it's an assumption of the magazine that the white females are going to be the ones that are going to be purchasing those, so that's what is the draw. This took a lot longer than I had anticipated. My video is very long, and I apologize. Be interested to see what you all saw. This was at Dillon's, our grocery store, our local grocery store, and then and I don't know if it was the October or November. I just took pictures of the magazines and then came home and did it. So I'm not quite clear if it was the November issues or the October issues primarily, but either way, interesting to take a peek at and just kind of view that from, standing back and viewing the whole spectrum of what are on those magazines. So we'll be interested to see what everyone else found. Thank you.